Hi everyone, and welcome to this week's tutorial. Today we're going to talk all about balance in the lower body, specifically the feet, the knees, and the ankles. So thanks for joining me. I'm so glad you're here. My guess is that you are here because you maybe have some kind of misalignment or pain or struggle to balance in your low body, something going on with the feet, something going on with the knees, or maybe a loved one has these struggles. So, this can be very limiting to our lives. It can be really frustrating. It can make us feel like we've got to kind of be afraid of falling all the time, like we've always got to hold on to something. It might make you feel like you don't even really want to go walk down the street, let alone like go for a hike or a longer walk or things like this. So it really can impact all facets of our life. And then from there, the risk of falling and fall prevention, especially as we age, can become very significant. As we age, the risk of falling not only itself increases, but I know there's a lot of research out there that kind of shows if we take a bad fall, it can really actually be the beginning of a really significant downward spiral in terms of health and lead to really bad outcomes, right? So it's really important that we do what we can to keep the balance and kind of resiliency in our feet and our lower bodies and keep our balance so that we don't feel like we're gonna fall and so that we do not actually fall and that we're also not afraid of falling, okay? So thanks again for joining me. My name is Linnea. I am the owner and founder of Limbra Arts, Pilates, and personal training here in Olympia. And then I also have a lot of services online, so you can access my teaching anywhere in the world. And let's dive into this topic of balance in the lower body. So are you afraid of falling? Right? Or do you know somebody who is? The first thing that comes to my mind with this idea of being afraid of falling is that term being paralyzed with fear, right? Often when there's a fear, there can be a sense of freezing, a sense of rigidity, a sense of kind of just being paralyzed, right? And when we think of that in terms of our muscles and in terms of our joints, it actually just purely the fear itself can lead to this feeling of kind of like stiffness and resistance and rigidity in our bones and our muscles, which oddly enough can actually make us more susceptible to falling. Okay, so the stiffness and the rigidity literally in our bones and our muscles, especially like in the feet and stuff like that, it's a bad recipe for actually being able to balance, being able to react and respond to what's going on. And the fear doesn't even make that any better. Okay, so literally you can be paralyzed with fear of falling, and then that can actually make you feel like you're even more afraid, and it's a downward spiral. So it can be a little bit of a trick because I don't want to scare you, but also we know that it's important to be aware of this concern and do something about it. So it's a little bit of a dance around, if we are stiff, if we are a little bit of afraid, like what can we do to stay a little bit loose in our body, stay a little bit relaxed, and just be cognizant of that. So the next thing I want to talk about here is just kind of the basics of foot function. Okay, nothing too complicated, nothing too scientific, although there is definitely a lot of scientific research and theory behind foot function and the biomechanics of kind of walking and gait and lower limb. So I'm going to give you a really broad overview, specifically how it applies to balance and maintaining better balance. Okay, so if we have a really rigid, stiff, it's often a high arched, but it could be kind of any foot shape, but if it's kind of locked in that shape, then that's not really actually good foot function. One of the key hallmarks to good foot function is the flexibility and the mobility of the foot. Okay, there's so many bones, there's so many little tiny joints in your feet. Your foot is really designed to be a mobile adapter, right? So it's designed to be able to adapt to all kinds of uneven surfaces on the ground, a little pebble, a rock, whatever the case may be. and that the foot is designed to be able to kind of like adapt and maneuver around that uneven ground without making it teeter and throw our whole body off, okay? So kind of relating back to the fear of falling and that idea of being paralyzed by fear, that idea in itself kind of limits the ability for our feet particularly to function the way they are designed. I like to give an image here. You can picture, I call it sometimes a teeter-totter, right? If you have a stiff board and it's got kind of like one point in the middle and you can kind of go up or down on either side, right? That's kind of the rigid version of foot function. And the more optimal version of foot function would be the image of a pancake hitting the pan. So if you imagine pancake batter and it hits the pan and it just kind of spreads, it adapts, it flows. And then in a good healthy foot, we want to be able to kind of spread and flow, and then we want to be able to kind of use all of that mobility to then gather force and be able to propel and move and push off of that. So we want to be a little bit more like a fluid pancake hitting the pan than this rigid teeter-totter, okay? And if you're curious, kind of like, okay, what the heck is this lady talking about? You could even just try to like stand on one foot and notice, does it feel like your foot is happy to spread out on the floor? Or do you feel like you're on a teeter-totter that's either going one way or the other, okay? So the last thing I want to touch on here for you guys is just kind of the consideration of previous injuries or alignment issues. You know, just because we've had an injury in the past and we might not be feeling active acute pain from that injury anymore, doesn't mean that our body has returned to proper alignment. Okay, so it's very common that we have an old injury in the body. It might be, you know, just 6 weeks old, a couple months old, or it might be 20 years old. But that old injury can still really be affecting the alignment of our bones, and the alignment in turn is the thing that kind of determines the pattern through which we're able to move. Okay, so there's the alignment that you could just like take a frozen picture and look at it, and then it's kind of like the pattern of movement around that alignment. And a lot of times what I see most common for my folks that really struggle with balance and lower limb problems is that there's some kind of misalignment issue. And if we combine kind of an alignment issue with that rigidity and stiffness, that is most often when I see a lot of balance issues, a really significant risk of fear of falling. You take kind of poor alignment and put it on top of the structure that feels like a teeter-totter, and that is kind of your worst case scenario in terms of balance. And unfortunately, a lot of times if we are that person, if we're the person that has kind of misalignments, old injuries, a lot of stiffness, you know, we can often get misguided in the fitness and therapeutic world to kind of be encouraged to just try harder to balance. And there's a lot of exercise that'll kind of just hold you to like hold on for dear life and really try to balance as long as you possibly can. But that can actually lend itself to a little bit this continued feeling of rigidity or stiffness or like holding on, which doesn't necessarily get us all the way back to that kind of relaxed, intuitive, comfortable ability to balance without like overly being like rigid and stiff around it. Okay, so that's kind of the element of how old injuries and misalignments and things like that could also be impacting your balance and just kind of the health of your lower body in general. So I hope this gives you some good things to think about. I'm so glad you guys joined me today. Please share this with somebody that you know and love that could use this information. This is a great one to send out to your loved ones or someone you know. So don't be a stranger. Feel free to leave a comment below, ask a question. I'm always happy to follow up. And I will see you guys next time. Bye for now.